Hey everyone, my name is Yasmin, and today I'll be talking about gender bias in text. I'm presenting on behalf of my team. We have Andrea, Ines, and Carolyn. So I'm going to walk you through what we'll be going over is the importance of tackling gender bias in text, the prototype that we did over the summer, the definition, the proposed methodology going forward, and we'd like to end with a discussion. So the importance of gender bias in text is, first, we'd like to promote inclusivity. We also want equality. We don't want to reinforce any psychological status that may be negative towards different groups, and also avoid social construct that could be towards roles or behaviors in society. As an example here, we put the Declaration of Montreal. They wrote the declaration completely in inclusive form, which was very interesting. And we'd like to also just review that the UN is promoting gender equity as one of their pillars of humanitarian movements. So over the summer at the AI for Social Good Lab, we did a prototype in the 3 last weeks. We call it BiaslyAI. And why we started this project was because there's no existing data sets talking about gender bias or addressing it. And sometimes the issue of having bias in existing data sets is that it can create a false positive. The current projects that are being done within the ML community is, we put 3 examples here, so co-reference resolution, word embeddings, and text classification, but the major takeaway here is that what they're doing is actually de-biasing the data sets that they've trained on. We put the link to the website here, maybe we'll visit it at the end of the presentation. What we'd like to go over is that when we presented people our sentences to label, we did it through crowdsourcing. First, they tried to label it, and it was through binary form, and so saying if something is gender biased or not gender biased is very complicated. Also, I think we did not have a substantial definition, and I think it's something that's very misunderstood for people. So we put a few examples here to read through. I think the interesting part is that we see a lot of confusion. You know, some people think it's biased, some people don't think it's biased, and as much as this can differ in views, it's also because the understanding of the topic is very complicated. So the big takeaway here was one, we need to go get a very good definition from experts. So we're talking about linguists, sociolinguists, and psychologists. This is what we did within the 2 first months of our internship right now at Mila. And we need to not do a binary form of labeling. So what is gender bias? Gender bias is something that is not necessarily structural. It can also be contextual. We are talking about something that can be unconscious but also conscious. And after having talked to many experts, we came up with a definition and tried to categorize it. There are different types of biases. This is our definition. As we know, it could change for any type of person. Today we'll be reviewing 3 types of gender bias and try to enlighten this for you. So we'll be looking through the semantics and maybe syntax of different sentences. First, we'll start off with the cultural sex stereotype. So what is the cultural sex stereotype? It's the preconceived ideas where we talk about a specific gender and then we conclude on something that is determined by their gender. So boys are aggressive, this is the example, and girls love to cook. These are something that we're trying to associate directly to a gender, and it starts by gender and goes to something more specific. The next definition is gender generalization, is when we go from something that is generalized to the gender. So use of gender-specific nouns or pronouns when describing something which is gender neutral, such as a teacher or a programmer. Here are examples. A teacher can think only about doing the most good for her class as a whole. A programmer must always carry his laptop with him. So the issue here is that teacher and programmer, we never mentioned the sex before specifying his or her. The third category we'd like to go over is abusive language, which is a subset of offensive or insulting words or characteristics that can be directly specified towards a gender. So the 2 examples here is, he is such a whiny, won't finish the word, all the time, and why is she so slutty? Both sentences came from Reddit, don't bring it against me. And I think this one is a bit more clear when it's something that is very negative proposed towards a specific gender. we like to do with these three definitions. The proposed methodology we have right now is to use existing data sets or web scrape, and we'd like to crowdsource again our labels, but through a different form, not binary. We'd like to break down the sentences to see if there are semantic patterns, and we'd like to augment, so shuffle the sentences that we've collected in order to enhance them so we can recirculate if there's similarities, and then label the new sentences and then go to the model. So when we are going to sentence gather, there's two ways of going about it. There's web scraping, which is great because you can control where you're getting your stuff from, but the processing of the data takes a lot of time, and also sometimes the sentences won't be so relevant to gender. The second proposed place to go get sentences would be using existing NLP data sets. We're less in control of what the sentences would look like, but the data will be clean. So these are two things to think about. When we're talking about semantic role labeling and breaking down the sentences in chunks, we're going to do sentence parsing. So what we'd like to do is see who is subject to what in the sentence, and I'm trying to make this simple for all of you. So we broke it down here. When men do housework, it is considered a nice favor. We can see that when is the time, men is the root of the sentence, and housework is related to the root, and so is a nice favor. So how would this look if we were to augment a simple sentence? The original sentence here is boys are usually aggressive. Boys are the root, and how would we change it? We'd like to replace it by something that could be comparable, so girls are usually aggressive, men are usually aggressive, women are usually aggressive, and then we'd like to get people to confirm and label if the sentence was gender biased or not. What would this look like once we now present it to our labelers through crowdsourcing? We would like to show the sentence and then have them tell us if it's not biased, if it's a stereotype, a gender generalization, or abusive language. And I think that'd be a little bit more clear. We, of course, would have to provide the definition and to inform our labelers. And so I'd like to conclude my presentation here. What we think this could have as an impact is that it can directly address the negative preconceived ideas that people have about gender-related topics or roles, as I